After a year of working as an ambulance driver and orderly, I got used to a lot of things. A scream, a liter of blood, and even death. I've seen all sorts of things. At first, critical situations drove me into a stupor, but over time, someone else's pain and death became something every day. By the way, I got a job as an ordinary driver, and my duties included only turning the steering wheel and monitoring the condition of the car. But there are always not enough paramedics, so you find yourself being picked up willy-nilly. The victims' loved ones were often unable to help, or there was no one around at all, which sometimes meant they had to carry people on stretchers. We often did this together with a paramedic, and I was constantly put on shift with Valya, a young girl. At the beginning of her work, she turned out to be so fragile. A short brown-haired woman with thin fingers and a sweet, slightly naive face. I was even a little worried how she would handle such a job. But she had the rest of her endurance. And for a year, carrying heavy paramedic kits and stretchers, she involuntarily pumped up her muscles. Her strong, sculpted shoulders stood out noticeably even under her jacket, and her face remained the same, childishly cute. In my mind, I called her the mighty princess, but I would never say it out loud. Subordination, all business. There was nothing strange about that call for us. The dispatcher accepted the call. A guy was shouting into the phone. A girl was hit here. Where? I don't know where the road is. The forest. Oh, this is the Vladimir Highway outside the city, do you know? I don't know where exactly. Can't you trace the call? There's a girl dying on the road. We really need you faster. I'll be there. By the way, we can track the call. But that guy turned off his phone for some reason after the call. He probably just didn't know how it worked. We're not going to miss them anyway, I thought. The Vladimir Highway is a direct road through forests and wastelands. There are no turns. More often than not, reckless drivers who think that speed limits were invented by fools break into such things. And only occasionally cyclists are knocked down before runners. Therefore, it is also not worth doing sports without reflective elements. It's 3 o'clock in the morning, though. What kind of sport is there? There was no time to think about it. Valya and I jumped into the car and hit the gas. We're plowing hard today, I stressed. I didn't even have time to drink coffee during the entire shift. Yeah, I noticed a long time ago that there are some special days when everyone seems to conspire. Either solar eclipses or coincidences. Or maybe Mercury will retrograde. Who will sort it out? What is he doing? I clarified, not understanding this strange terminology. Oh, don't pay attention. It's a joke. Sometimes you want to believe that everything is not just like that. Valya waved her hand. The girl sometimes said all sorts of strange things that I didn't really understand. She believed that planets somehow influence character, and the position of the sun determines our lives. I was far from it, and I didn't really want to figure it out. My mom always told me that I was an Aries because I was born in April. This is my only knowledge of horoscopes, and I didn't worry about it. What difference does it make where your sun is in your horoscope if it's always overhead at noon? But I've never argued with Valya about this. Our work is hard. Everyone saves his head as best he can. We sped through the city with sirens wailing, and then turned off and jumped out onto a long, dark road. This track always seemed kind of abandoned, and as if no one was using it at all. Straight, smooth, asphalt, without a single pit. Silhouettes of trees on the left, and an endless black field on the right flashed in the headlights. I looked ahead, trying not to get distracted. It's still a long way from the city. Will we be able to help that girl and get her to the hospital? We have to make it. Humans are tenacious creatures. Valya was sitting next to me, rummaging through her phone. Her face remained calm in the dim light of the screen. The girl knew that at this stage of the mission, everything depended on me. She'll only come into action when we get there. How many morons are there in the world? Her partner suddenly said, pressing the phone's lock button. What are you talking about? I asked, not looking away from the dark road. You know, sometimes you read comments on social media and your eyes pop out. It would be great if in real life, every person had a dossier with their comments attached, she said indignantly. And what would that do for you? Well, Valya turned in my direction with eyes full of delight. People always want to appear good, but otherwise everyone would be in the palm of their hand. A guy comes on a date, pretends to be a bunny, and you scroll through his opinion on the internet and you can already say goodbye. It's fast, convenient, and awesome. Of course, you came up with a great idea, though what's to stop the so-called morons from just stopping? Writing comments? Well, so that Valya doesn't figure them out. Pancake. The girl thought about it and smiled, realizing her mistake. Apparently, the world is incorrigible. You're just an idealist. People are just people, although even I would stay away from some of them. But due to the duty of the profession, I know, she interrupted and turned away from the window. No matter how ugly a person is, they need to be saved. When I went to medical school, it seemed to me that saving people's lives was the best job. And now I realize the reality. And she is very far from the illusions that my head was filled with. We had already driven more than 10 kilometers in the dark, and the black ribbon of asphalt remained clear. No cars, no people. Just a forest, a field, and the lights of a city somewhere in the distance. Miss, do you see anyone? Asked Valya, looking ahead. She also felt that we had been driving for too long. Not yet, I replied. Where are they? What is it? The girl asked, squinting her eyes and moving closer to the Purin. Glass. I pressed the accelerator pedal to the floor, thinking that I could afford to drive faster on an empty highway. At the same moment, a woman appeared on the road. She just appeared out of nowhere, 2 meters from the hood. All I could see was a white dress, pale, almost transparent skin, and long black hair. The impact was dull and terrifying. The windshield was covered with a web of cracks. The woman soared into the air and thundered across the roof of the ambulance and fell to the asphalt somewhere behind. I slammed on the brake. The wheels screeched, and the steering wheel lurched. The car turned slightly. There was silence. Only her heart was pounding in her chest and pounding in her ears. Valya looked at me with round eyes. There was terror in them. We stared at each other in silence, numb from what had happened. I hit a man. My insides twisted into a tight knot. It actually happened. Valya shouted and jumped out of the car like a tight spring. I flew out into the street. There was a deep dent and blood on the hood of the ambulance. A lot of blood. I clutched my head. It's bad. Very bad. A car weighing more than 4 tons hit a woman at high speed. And most likely fatal. We were on our way to save a man. But in the end, we were killed. I killed him. It's just my mistake. How am I supposed to live with this now? My driver's license will be taken away, and I won't be able to work. What am I going to live on? What the hell kind of rights am I going to jail for? They'll definitely put me in jail. I looked at the hood, and my whole body was raging with panic. My legs and arms were shaking, and my lungs felt cramped. Valya was already running back to the scene of the tragedy, and I came to my senses and followed her. A woman in white was lying on the asphalt, a few dozen meters from the car. and suddenly she began to rise, slowly and smoothly. She sat up as if she had woken up from a dream, and then turned her head and looked at us. There was no pain, no horror, not even surprise in her eyes, just emptiness. I've always believed that killing a person is harder than it looks. It's only in the movies. Someone falls down the stairs and his head turns 180 degrees. But I didn't know that people could take such a blow. It's just a miracle. I looked at the victim. She was a young girl, just over 20. The injuries were visible, even in the moonlight. My head is broken. The right half of his face is covered in blood. His white dress is torn in several places, and his whole body is covered with terrible abrasions, scratches, and bruises. Making a person ride on asphalt is like grating him, but at the same time, the victim was trying to get to his feet. "Stay down. Don't get up," Valya said sharply. She was already on one knee and checking the girl's pulse. "Misha, here's a stretcher and my bag." I rushed to the car, grabbed the paramedic kit, slung the stretcher over my shoulder, and ran back. Everything was burning hot inside. At that moment, I wasn't thinking about myself, but about the girl I'd hit. My life depended on hers. The victim's jaw was slightly dislocated. I was swollen shut, but she stubbornly tried to stand up. The girl didn't seem to understand what had happened. Valya held her back, repeating, "Don't move, we'll carry you." Her partner quickly took out a syringe from her kit, filled it with something, and injected it into her shoulder. "Misha, come help me," Valya said. We laid the victim on the asphalt, carefully put a stretcher under her, and lifted her up. I walked ahead and thought, and who is she? And where did it come from? This is not the same girl we were called here for. Or is she? It turns out that she was hit twice today, but she's still alive. We loaded her into an ambulance. I jumped behind the wheel and asked Valya uncertainly, "Well, are we going to the hospital?" "Sure! Where else?" she shouted. That's right, it's a stupid question. I turned the car around and drove towards the city. I wanted to look around and see what was going on in the sea, and it was twitching noisily. It was felt that Valya was having a hard time keeping her. I thought maybe that was a good thing. People in critical condition are not that active. We raced through the darkness, sirens blaring. It was still a hell of a long way to the city. "Wait, where are you going? Wait!" "Misha, stop it! Help me!" shouted Valya. Her voice was filled with horror. I had just started to slow down when the rear doors swung open. It was heard as something heavy fell out and rolled on the asphalt. The car stopped, and I was finally able to turn around. Shocked, Valya sat in the cabin, clutching in the fourth drip. Her face turned as white as a sheet, and her eyes widened. The doors were open behind her. It's dark behind them. There was no one on the bed. The injured girl is missing. Just think, she jumped out. I couldn't hold her back, my partner said, confused. We sat there looking at each other, having no idea what was going on. This has never happened in our entire practice. Absolutely nothing like that. I was sure that this time the girl was definitely dead, but suddenly I caught a glimpse of her white dress in the darkness. "Valya," I pointed with my finger. "There she is." Her partner turned around. "Oh my gosh, I think she's a nutcase." I imagined something completely insane. If we analyze the whole situation, it seemed that the girl in white did not want to be rescued at all. It was as if she deliberately threw herself under cars, wanting to lose her life. But she couldn't do it. "What's wrong with her? Maybe she got stoned by something?" Valya exclaimed and jumped out. I ran too, I thought we definitely wouldn't miss it this time. We'll put him on a cot and fix him with straps." The girl was slowly walking along the road, and behind her was a trail of blood. The ruby stream was spreading thickly on the asphalt, but this lady in white walked as if nothing bothered her. "Just stay where you are, we want to help." Valya caught up with the girl and grabbed her shoulder, and then she turned around. Her face had completely changed. The eyes became colorless. Her skin turned a bluish, earthy hue, and her lips turned black. She opened her mouth so wide that her throat was visible and screamed like a possessed woman. She was probably possessed, though. I had no doubt about it now. The creepy woman spread her arms. Her fingers elongated and curled, becoming like the claws of a bird of prey. I ran up to Valya, tugged on her jacket, trying to pull her away from this demoness. The possessed woman's clawed hand whistled through the air and only grazed her partner slightly, but it was enough to tear the fabric and cut the skin. Valya screamed in pain. "Run, run!" I shouted. We rushed to the car, jumped into the cabin, and slammed the doors at the same time. There was a violent impact from the other side, followed by wild, inhuman screams from the screeching of metal. Without thinking for a second, I ran through the cabin. He got behind the wheel and pressed the accelerator pedal to the floor without looking in the mirrors. The car lurched forward. Valya sat down on the seat next to him. She was twirling her phone in her hands, locking it and unblocking it. It was her typical habit of dealing with stress. There was a look of stupor on the girl's face. She was silent and pressed the button monotonously. 3 deep cuts were visible on his shoulder through the torn jacket. There was a look of stupor on the girl's face. She was silent and pressed the button monotonously. 3 deep cuts were visible on his shoulder through the torn jacket. That freak had injured her with just a wave of her hand. There's so much power in her. What if it had hit you in the throat? We got away on time. Valya took a noisy breath and then slowly exhaled. The face, pale with horror, became alive again. Doctors are the most stress-resistant people. They know how to switch quickly and calm down. This is a professional skill. "I don't even know what substances can do this to people," she said, shaking her head. I was surprised, involuntarily raising my voice. "She's not human. She's some kind of demon." "Don't go crazy. There are no demons," the girl said firmly. In an extreme situation, she suddenly became an implacable skeptic, forgetting about her tendency to mystify everything around her. Think about it. Someone hit this woman before us. Then I drove into it. She fell out of the car at high speed, but she's still running and fighting like a bear. People can't do that, I argued. "Misha, be careful." Valya suddenly screamed. She saw a human figure in the headlights before I did. I swerved sharply to the right. The car tilted for a second. We could have easily rolled over, but we miraculously held on. It was only by aligning the movement that I was able to reproduce this image in my memory. A woman in a white dress stained with blood and dirt. I asked, without turning to Valya. I was stuck in one position. His eyes never left the road. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my palms hurt. The muscles in his entire body were tense. "It looks like it," Valya whispered. Her partner looked a little confused, but she no longer denied the obvious. If that woman had been human, she wouldn't have been able to overtake our car and get in our way again. There can only be a supernatural explanation for this. We raced through the darkness. I stared ahead intently, ready to swerve sharply at any moment. My nerves were on edge. Valya slightly unbuttoned her jacket and tried to get ready. She picked up the radio, pressed the button, and said, "Ivansova-Vladimirsko Highway. We have a problem. Over." In response, there was only a high-frequency noise. similar to the screeching of a damaged speaker. Valya dropped the walkie-talkie and took out her cell phone. She fiddled with it and said, "There is no connection. Nothing at all. Not even an emergency." I wasn't surprised. I've already realized that we've fallen into some kind of diabolical trap. We were cut off from the world and from any opportunity to call for help. 3 o'clock in the morning, a black forest and an ocean of bushes squeezed the road from two sides. There's no one else on the track but us. The city is only 5 kilometers away. There's a little bit left, just a little bit more. Escape from the darkness of the night and reach the first streetlights. And then she appeared on the way again. The woman stood in the middle of the road, arms outstretched as if on purpose, exposing herself to the blow. There was no way around it. It was too late. "Don't slow down, Misha. Push her, push her," screamed Valya. And I wasn't going to stop. On the contrary, he accelerated. We flew into it at full speed. The car shook. The windshield was covered with blood. There was a rumble under the bottom, and the car began to skid. This thing got stuck under the bumper and dragged on the asphalt. I realized that if I didn't stop, we would definitely flip over. We'll fly into a ditch. And that's it. The end. There was no choice. I pushed the brake pedal all the way down. The car creaked and stopped. I wanted to believe that I would be able to back up a little, drop this terrible ballast, and go on. But the car was stuck. The engine was roaring, and the wheels were just spinning helplessly on something wet and slippery. "What'll we do?" Valya asked quietly. "I'll go out and try." I started talking. "No, don't do that," she interrupted abruptly. We both knew that this creature was still alive, but we couldn't decide how to proceed. We were taught to save people, not kill demons. Something bumped under the roof. Bones cracked. The front of the car has shifted slightly to the side. The creature got out from under the bumper. Valya jumped out of her chair and rushed into the salon. She began frantically rummaging through the drawer, guarding instruments, syringes, and bandages. I looked back and saw that she was holding a scalpel in her hand. A scalpel? She would also have armed herself with a stethoscope, like a mace. This creature had withstood so many collisions, and the mighty princess hoped to defend herself from it with a sharp piece of iron. Either she thought it would help her, or she wasn't thinking with her head at all. Something hit the body of the car, and it started moving. "Valya, I'll distract her. You run, okay?" I tried to speak calmly, confidently, although inside everything was shrinking with fear. "I'll manage somehow. I'll figure something out. The main thing is that you get to the city." "Quiet," shouted Valya, darting her gaze at the windows. The rear doors swung open, or rather they were ripped off their hinges with a bang. A demoness appeared in the doorway against the background of impenetrable darkness. Rather, she now looked like a piece of bloody meat. The white dress turned into rags hanging from her mutilated body. There was almost no hair on his head. The last strands stuck together in clumps. The right side of his face had been stripped to the skull. "Valya!" I shouted. I wanted to rush to her and pull her back, to shield her from the monster with me, but I didn't have time. This is not a human mass of blood and flesh. With lightning speed, she grabbed my partner by the neck, and she carried him off into the darkness. Valya didn't even scream. She just flew off into the darkness after the monster, and the scalpel hit the floor with a clang. I ran outside, looked around, but saw nothing but darkness. Streams of blood on the asphalt reflecting the flashing light. And I understood everything. We need to get out of here without looking back. It was my only chance to escape. I ran, forgetting about my partner. I ran every second, expecting someone to grab me by the scruff of the neck. Terror drove him on. My heart was pounding like crazy. Adrenaline was pumping through my head and confusing my thoughts. And finally, a road sign splashed ahead, indicating a turn. I ran as hard as I could, feeling my muscles burn and my lungs itch. The long-awaited intersection of the highway with the outskirts of the road. I'm very close. The night city suddenly opened before my eyes. The lights of the lanterns. I was on the verge of salvation. "Misha! Misha! Wait!" They shouted at my back. It was Vali's voice. I looked around. There, in the distance, stood an indistinct dark figure. Even though it was a familiar voice, I couldn't believe it was my partner. She would hardly have been able to stand up to a blood demon, alone and without a weapon. Although I hesitated a bit, I ran on to escape. In the morning, a rescue team was sent to the highway. They combed the road, the forest, the field, and found nothing. Nothing at all. There were no bodies, no ambulances, no traces of blood. Everything disappeared, as if it had never happened. It was as if someone had erased everything, or maybe it all happened in some other world, from which I managed to escape. There is no shaft. She disappeared. I could be mistaken for a madman. Who made up this story in his unhealthy head? But my partner's disappearance was quite real, as was the disappearance of the car. My words were treated with suspicion, and even a certain irony. Valia was put on the wanted list. They haven't realized yet that they'll probably never find her. After that incident, I wanted to quit my job, but then I changed my mind. I stayed to work in the ambulance, as if that could somehow atone for my impotence. Now I was mostly left on shift with a guy named Roman. He was quite harsh and didn't talk to me on equal terms, so I just did my job in silence, trying to ignore his rudeness. I missed Valia and constantly felt an emptiness in my chest. It had been a long time, but she was still missing. One night, Roman and I arrived for a routine call. Someone got sick. My partner went up to the apartment, and I stayed in the car at the entrance. Suddenly, the walkie-talkie hissed, and a voice came from there. "Ivanzova, Vladimirsko Highway, over." And my heart started pounding. It just couldn't be. "Ivanzova, Vladimirsko Highway, reception." It was repeated from the radio. I picked up the radio, pressed the button, and answered in a trembling voice. "Ermolov is listening." "Misha, is that you? Are you really?" Such a familiar, kind voice of a friend sounded. "I'm the one who's fooling around." "I'm so glad to hear from you. You have no idea. I'm still here, on this road. I need help. Please, take me away from here," she said softly and sadly. "I'm really sorry," I said. "Misha, it's so cold and dark in here. It's always dark. So are you coming to pick me up?" she asked hopefully. I understand you, but I was glad to hear it. "Bye, Misha." The voice on the radio faded away. I knew it wasn't Valia. She was the one who tried to lure me to her track again. But I still heard my friend's voice, and it was like saying goodbye. That was the last time we talked.